Have you ever met someone where just looking rising and stirring your entire inner world, all because of one person's presence. You can't explain why, from the first meeting, they feel so familiar. Why a single glance makes you feel as though you've seen a private part of yourself. This pull doesn't come from their perfection, but because they touch something you cannot ignore. This is what people call a twin flame. A twin flame is not your other half who makes you whole. They are a mirror reflecting you, both the beauty and the hidden shadows. They don't arrive to make you peaceful, but to stir you, to make you look deeply into yourself and ask questions you thought were already answered. Carl Jung never directly used the term twin flame, but his theories on the unconscious, the shadow, archetypes, and the individuation process all point to this. Some connections are not here to love in the usual way. They are here to transform. They shake every layer of defense in you. Without trying, just by being there, they make you see yourself more clearly. At times, you want to get closer. At times, you want to run away. But deep down, you know you can't pretend you've never met them. Not because they are too special, but because they have made you see an essential part of yourself. This connection can form in just a moment, a glance, a sentence. But from that moment on, everything changes. You feel both anticipation and fear, the urge to move closer and the instinct to step back. And you realize this feeling is not simply liking someone. It is meeting yourself through another. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Sometimes what we call destiny is the call of parts within us that have been forgotten or never fully lived, now being awakened. A twin flame does not come to complete you. They come to remind you that you have always been complete, only you haven't allowed yourself to live that way. They may hurt you, but not to wound you, rather, to make you peel away the layers you've worn for too long just to feel safe. They don't bring you answers. They bring you the reason to start searching. And this journey, no matter how long it lasts or how it ends, will change you. Not to turn you into someone else, but to bring you back to yourself. Clearer, more truthful, and freer. Because in the end, a twin flame is not just a love story. It is a soul encounter where you learn to love another and, more importantly, learn to love yourself. And if you are in such a connection, perhaps you are ready to walk that journey where love is not just an emotion, but the growth of the soul. In the next part, we will explore the 5 most profound stages of transformation in the twin flame journey, the turning points anyone in this kind of love must face. Not to hold on to them, but to hold on to yourself. Number 2. The 5 stages of twin flame love. Stage 1. The soul's recognition, when the soul sees itself through another person. There are encounters unlike anything you have ever experienced, not based on logic, not on shared interests, not on any reasonable cause. Yet from the very first moment, you feel as though you've known that person for a very long time, even if it's the first time you've met. You cannot explain that feeling with logic. You just know something within you has shifted. A familiarity, deep and undeniable, so real you cannot ignore it. Carl Jung called this moment archetypal recognition. At the deepest layer of the human psyche, he believed there are archetypal images stored in the collective unconscious. When 2 people share the same archetypal frequency, carrying a similar kind of inner energy, they recognize each other not through the mind, but through the soul. And that is when your soul recognizes itself through another person. Imagine there is a room inside you that no one has stepped into for a long time. Everything is still there, intact, but covered in dust. There are picture frames yet to be hung, windows blocked from the light, and sunlight itself forgotten. Then one day, someone appears. They don't clean, they don't ask, they don't try to do anything. They simply step in, gently, as if they have been here before. And strangely, the room quietly lights up, not because they brought the light, but because their very presence reminds you this place is still alive, still beautiful, and worthy of being opened. That moment is not about meeting the right person. It's about your soul, for the first time in a long while, being seen through another human being. A young woman once shared that the shortest relationship of her life was also the most unforgettable, not because it lasted, but because it awakened her deeply. They met at a small gathering of mutual friends, spoke for less than an hour, but she left the party with a strange feeling, as if she had just met a soul deeply familiar to her, yet entirely unknown. Just a few days later, they fell into each other, as if there was nothing to lose. But that love was not comfortable. It was not the sweetness she was used to. It was like an electric current, awakening all the layers of emotions she had once locked away. Intense excitement, has been named. And you know the new journey has begun. Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." The soul's recognition is the first door. It is not loud, does not require a reason, and has no clear proof to convince you that this is the important person. But once it opens, you cannot go back to being who you were. Because you haven't just met a person, you have met yourself, not the persona you built to fit into the world, not the image you maintained to be loved, but your raw, honest, unnamed self. That resonance, what you feel, is not truly about them. It comes from the moment you first touch something deeper within yourself, something no past relationship has awakened. Their presence wakes you up. But the next journey of transformation, confrontation, and return will be entirely yours. That connection may not become the love story you hoped for, and the most beautiful part is, even if they leave, you still keep the most important thing, the part of you that was once lost, now returned. Sometimes that's someone you've met only a few times, but remember vividly. Sometimes it's a short-lived relationship that makes you rethink your entire life. Sometimes it's just a casual conversation, but from that moment on, you no longer see yourself the same way. If you've ever met someone who made you feel like that, you don't have to share details. Just leave a single dot in the comments, so someone reading knows they're not alone in that experience. Because there are things that don't need analysis or explanation. You only need to know they're real, and that they happened. Stage 2. The mirror of illusion. When you fall in love with your own projection. After the soul has been awakened, a new stage begins. One that seems to be the most beautiful moment of love. Everything feels magical. The other person seems to understand you without words. Every text message, every glance, every gentle touch makes you tremble. You believe you've met the right person. And this time, without a doubt, this is true love. But there is one thing Carl Jung once emphasized. Projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. The unconscious, with all the parts of you that have not been fully lived or integrated, will begin to find a way to express itself when you meet your twin flame. But it does not do this directly. Instead, it borrows the other person's face to reflect back what you are longing for, lacking, or have not dared to acknowledge within yourself. You are not loving them as a real human being. You are loving the image of them in your mind, an idealized version you have unconsciously constructed. This person carries all the qualities you have always dreamed of: understanding, strength, peace, stability, unconditional love for you. But the truth is, you are in love with the unexpressed light in yourself. You admire their freedom, perhaps because deep down you are still living too cautiously. You are drawn to their calmness, maybe because you have been too weary from a turbulent inner life. You feel they are a healer, perhaps because you have never truly been healed. And then, unconsciously, you begin to project. You don't realize it. You still believe you understand them, that you love them, but in fact, you are stepping into an emotional space woven from your dreams, your gaps, and the unaccepted parts within yourself. The story of J. Gatsby in The Great Gatsby is a classic literary example of projection. Gatsby did not love Daisy, the real flesh and blood woman with her limits and selfishness. He loved the image of Daisy in his mind, the symbol of his dream, beauty, and an idealized past. He built his entire life around that dream, hosting lavish parties, amassing wealth, all to impress the woman whom, in truth, he never truly knew. When he finally touched the real Daisy, fragile, vague, unable to love him back as he dreamed, everything collapsed. And his death, through Jung's lens, was not just a love tragedy, but the collapse of an unacknowledged illusion. I once heard the story of a woman who fell in love with a man online for nearly a year. They met only a few times but spoke every day. In her eyes, he was deep, calm, different from any of her past relationships. She felt safe, listened to, understood. She believed he was the special person the universe sent. But when they began living closer to each other, she saw that he was not as stable as she had thought, often avoided problems, and did not truly want deep commitment. She was disappointed, but the deepest pain was not about him. It was about losing the image she had lived with for so long in her mind. She realized she had not loved him. She had loved the version of him in her mind, an ideal man built from everything she had always wanted, someone who listens, someone stable, someone mature. When he no longer played that role, the love stage, one of two things will happen. Either you leave because you feel they are not the same anymore, or you stay, but with eyes more awakened. And at this moment, you begin to understand that twin flame love does not come simply to make you happy. It comes to wake you up, to make you face the truth. And the first truth is, you cannot love anyone fully if you have not dared to see yourself honestly. When illusion dissolves, you may feel pain, but it is the pain of awakening. And here, the real journey is only just beginning. Stage 3. The fall from fantasy. When illusions shatter, and you must face yourself. At first, you believe you have found the great love of your life. Your emotions burst. The world suddenly feels more alive, and this person, even though you don't really know them deeply, makes you feel seen, understood, and loved without effort. You tell yourself, this must be destiny. But then, over time, the first cracks appear. Their patience starts to fade. Sweet messages become less frequent. Gestures that once made you feel loved turn into things you wait for in weary anticipation. You begin to feel disappointed, easily hurt, wondering, have they changed? Or, did I do something wrong? And sometimes, the answer is not about them, but about you. Because perhaps this is the moment you are falling from the dream you built yourself. Carl Jung called this stage disillusionment. But the truth is, you are not disillusioned with them. You are disillusioned with the image you once placed on them. A beautiful, perfect image, exactly as you longed for, but not born from their real self. And that is deeply painful. Painful not only because they seem different, but because you must face yourself, the disappointment of realizing you loved a version of them that never truly existed. A woman once wrote to the channel saying she had loved a man much older than her. From the first meeting, she felt drawn into his quiet, confident energy. He didn't talk much, but whenever they conversed, she felt as if she was touched at the deepest level of her heart. She thought he was mature, stable, and experienced. But after a few months of dating, she realized he avoided emotions, didn't want commitment, and often retreated into silence whenever issues arose. She was heartbroken. But what hurt most was not his silence. It was that he no longer matched the image of the steady man she had admired. And then she realized she was the one who had written that image. He had never promised it. Disillusionment is not a bad thing. In Jung's view, it is a necessary turning point for you to start seeing the real person, both theirs and your own. Because real love cannot grow in a space full of illusions. It only begins when you dare to walk through disappointment and stay with eyes cleared. In twin flame love, the disillusionment stage can be more intense than in ordinary relationships, because you once felt you had found everything. You once thought, it can't be wrong, this person is the other half of my soul. But the higher the expectation, the deeper the disappointment. Not because they are bad, but because they are not who you imagined. At that point, many will choose to leave because the pain and hurt seem too big to continue. But there is another path, harder but braver, to stay, to learn to see them as they truly are, and to see yourself without the painted colors. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When you see them avoid issues, ask, what have I been avoiding in myself? When you feel they are not listening, ask, am I listening to myself? This stage is like a mirror, and if you are brave enough not to break it, you will see very real parts of yourself that you have long neglected. Not everyone is ready to go through this stage, because admitting you have loved a dream rather than the real person takes courage. It means discarding the beautiful image you worked so hard to build. You must admit, I don't really know them, and I don't fully know myself. This can make you feel empty, as if you have lost something important. But sometimes, what you have lost is not love, but illusion. And sometimes, after it all, you may feel grateful for disillusionment. Only then can you truly see them without fog, without expecting them to be someone, or forcing them to play your savior. You see them as a human, with both light and shadow, with limits and wounds. And if at that moment you still feel love, that love has taken a step closer to truth. Stage 4. The sacred distance, when you learn to love without holding on. Twin flame. Love, after stages of intense passion and deep disillusionment, reaches an important transformation, separation. But unlike an ordinary breakup, where people leave because the feelings are gone, separation in the twin flame journey is a sacred ritual, a silent space, not for running away, but for growing up. Carl Jung called this the moment each person enters individuation, the process of returning to the true self, where you no longer see yourself through the eyes of another, no longer react from images distorted by expectations, wounds, or the fear of abandonment. He said, individuation means becoming a single, homogeneous being. In other words, you must become a single, whole individual, no longer dissolved into another, even in love. And to do that, sometimes you need to step out of that mirror, stop seeing yourself only through someone else's eyes, and learn to see yourself in silence. Imagine walking into a room where every sound has stopped. No one to tell your sadness to, no daily messages, no gaze that makes your heart race. Just you, with yourself. You're scared. You feel empty. But then, if you don't run away, something between Emma Watson and her long-term partner, Leo Robinson. Despite media attention, they have always maintained a significant quiet space between their private lives and their love life. Emma once shared, "I need time alone to understand who I am, not as someone's girlfriend." This separation does not mean leaving each other, but rather both understanding that loving someone does not mean merging with them, but growing alongside them. Separation is the greatest test in twin flame love. Not to see if you can keep the other person, but to see if you can keep yourself. When you no longer have their presence to blame or to rely on, you finally look back. How have I loved? What have I neglected in myself? And what you find may make you cry. But it is that very thing that will save you. Carl Jung never saw separation as negative. In the collective unconscious, withdrawing into darkness has always been a necessary phase to prepare for a stronger return. You must enter the desert of the soul, where no one is beside you to hold your hand, to learn to walk on your own feet. Neuroscience also explains this. When someone experiences separation in love, the brain regions controlling habits and emotional reactions, especially the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, become highly active. But if the person is patient enough not to react by clinging and instead spends time observing themselves, the brain reactivates the regions for self-awareness and emotional recovery. Scientists call this emotional self-regulation. This not only helps you stay calmer, but also helps you re-establish boundaries and personal needs more deeply than ever before. In that place, you learn to listen to the loneliness you once filled with someone else's presence. You learn to have dinner alone without feeling lacking. You learn to get through a sad day without messaging someone for reassurance. And then you realize, love is not possession. It's giving the other person enough space so they can also be themselves. If you are in the separation stage, you are not alone. Many are walking this path not to lose each other, but to find themselves again. And if you are patient enough to walk through this silence, you will arrive at a place no one can predict, where love is no longer craving, but a free presence. Stage 5. The return to wholeness. When you come back to yourself and choose love freely. After everything, the first spark, beautiful illusions, disillusionment, hurt and distance, you begin to see everything with different eyes. No longer the enamored gaze of someone seeking another to fill their emptiness, but the awakened gaze of someone who once lost their way and has now begun to find themselves again. This stage is no longer about seeking love as salvation, but about realizing true love is not something to hold on to, but something chosen each day, zrenia, from a place of fullness within. The other person may still be present somewhere, or may have left your life, but the biggest change is in you now. No longer dependent on validation, no longer trading yourself to keep someone, no longer loving from fear or lack. You are now a version of yourself who can stand alone, yet still remain open to receive. There's a beautiful image close to this journey. A lotus rising from the mud, reaching up to the water's surface and blooming in silence. The lotus's beauty does not come from where it grows, but from its choice to rise above the mud without being stained. Love within you now is the same. It is no longer the clumsy love of the early, unformed days. It is no longer love to compensate for what's missing. It is love that has gone through darkness, endured trials, accepted both light and pain, and because of that, has matured. You begin to understand, love is no longer we belong to each other, but we choose to walk together, even if we do not need each other to survive. A woman once shared that after years of being tangled in intense relationships, she entered a long, quiet period without attachment to anyone, not because she had lost faith in love, but because, for the first time, her greatest desire was to learn to love herself first. Her habits were rewritten from small things. Time alone was no longer filled with emptiness, but with gratitude. Then one day, love appeared, as gentle as a cool breeze after a scorching summer. This person did not make her heart chaotic, nor did they make her lose her direction. But beside them, she felt the freedom to be herself, without acting, without forcing herself to fit. For the first time, love came without fear. That is also when you know you have returned, and you also realize, not everyone who passes through your life is meant to stay. Some appear only to touch a hidden part of you, the part you once forgot existed. They don't come to be your other half, but to remind you that you have always been whole. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." meet yours, maybe a completely new person, maybe a familiar face that once broke your heart. But this time, your gaze is no longer naive, seeing them as the whole world. You see them simply as a human being with all their beauty and limits. A faint smile appears, not because they came back, not because they left, but because you know, no matter what, you will be fine. Because now, you truly have yourself. That is the final gift of twin flame love. Not someone to be with forever, but a journey that helps you remove the mask, let go of expectations, break free from the dream, so you can love with a real heart. Not a heart needing someone to fill it, but a heart healed, full, and strong enough to love, without fear of loss. Thank you for being here until the very last moments, gentle but full of meaning. Not everyone is brave enough to enter a journey where love is no longer just sweet feelings, but a sharp mirror, forcing you to face, to shed, to grow. You may have once thought, true love is when two people belong to each other. But after it all, you will realize some people are sent not to stay, but to touch a deep part you once forgot. Not to complete you, but to awaken you. Not to build a we, but to bring you back to rebuilding yourself, from within. If something in this journey has made you pause, to breathe deeper, to reflect on a relationship, or simply to realize how far you have come, then perhaps you have truly begun your return journey. And if something touched you, don't forget to share it with someone who needs it, so they too may take one step closer to their truest self. Because sometimes just one moment of being touched is enough to change everything. Have you ever done everything right just to be self-abandonment? We learn to please early on, from the expectant eyes of our parents, the praise of our teachers, the fear of not being loved, and the emptiness that followed when we disappointed someone. We grew up in environments where being good meant being obedient, self-sacrificing, and putting aside our true feelings to keep the peace. No one taught us that sometimes saying no is a sacred act of self-love. Carl Jung once wrote in Psychological Aspects of the Persona, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. We cannot change anything until we accept it." And people-pleasing, that seemingly gentle, agreeable persona, is one of the most dangerous masks. It earns us affection, but we are never truly seen. People love the good image we present, but few ever know the storms underneath. When you first learn to say no, you may tremble. Your voice might falter, your hands may sweat, your heart may pound like you've done something wrong. But don't rush back to old habits. That moment is the tearing of the mask. It is the step outside the comfort zone, the zone where you've only existed as a version molded by others' expectations. No is more than a word. It is a declaration of honesty with your soul. Picture a young woman. After 10 years of being a wife, a mother, and a daughter-in-law, she barely knows what she likes or wants. She is always the one cleaning up after the party, putting her work aside for others, never complaining, because life means thinking of others. One day, a colleague invited her to a painting class in the evening. Her heart leaps, but her mouth starts forming the usual polite excuse. Then, like a dormant instinct awakening, she says, "I'll go. I need to do this for myself." In that moment, she steps into her real world, one where life is no longer about pleasing others, but about becoming herself. Jung believed that when we repeatedly reject our true emotions to please others, we push our authenticity into the shadow. In Ion, Researches into the Phenomenology of the Self, he wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. The shadow is a true moral problem, and becoming aware of it demands immense effort from the ego. In other words, saying no, being honest with your feelings, is a deeply ethical act, not selfishness, as we're often led to believe." Transformation doesn't happen instantly. When you say no to an unreasonable request, the other person may feel disappointed. When you walk away from a relationship held together only by your endurance, you might hear accusations that you've changed. When you choose honesty over charm, you may feel lonely. But in that silence, your inner voice becomes clearer. You begin to listen to yourself, to know what you need, to know what brings you peace. Another example comes from therapy. A young man lives with a chronic nice guy syndrome. He always says yes to coworkers, takes on extra tasks just to be recognized. He thinks it's diligence, kindness, but over the years, he has suffered from insomnia, chronic fatigue, and even signs of mild depression. During one session, he's asked to imagine saying no to his boss's unreasonable demand. He breaks down in tears, not from fear of his boss, but because for the first time, he feels he's worth defending. That is the moment of touching the shadow, where he had buried his fear of rejection and his false belief that his value lay in being liked. In truth, when we dare to say no, what we're doing is drawing a boundary between the self and the world, between what's expected and what's real. Carl Jung called this an essential act of individuation, so that your soul does not dissolve into the crowd. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. A man who has never walked through the inferno of his inner passions has never truly overcome them. And sometimes saying no is stepping into that inferno where you face the fear of being disliked, of being abandoned, but also where you find your strength, dignity, and freedom. Don't misunderstand. Living honestly doesn't mean being cold, selfish, or rigid. It means you stop unconsciously betraying yourself and start living from a deeper place, a place where true love is possible. Because love does not arise from endless compromise. It is born from the meeting of two real selves with nothing to hide. And remember this, every time you say no without guilt, you expand the sky of your soul. Every time you reject something that no longer fits, you hit reset on your understanding of love, connection, and worth. And in that journey, you are not losing love. You are relearning how to love yourself rightfully and completely. Because as Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The most terrifying yet most liberating act is to accept oneself fully. And perhaps saying no when it matters is one of the first courageous steps toward that acceptance. Number 2, from roles to essence, you remove the mask and begin to live truthfully. Following the moment you learn to say no without guilt, something strange begins to happen. The roles you've played in life start to crack. You no longer smile to hide exhaustion. You no longer nod when your mind wants to turn away. You no longer fit into expectations that have become too tight. This is the moment you begin to take off the mask, the one that once helped you survive, be loved, be accepted, but now has become the most subtle prison for your soul. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the part of you that you show to the outside world to fit in. The persona is a tool to make impressions, but it also hides your true self. It is not inherently bad. At certain points in life, it is necessary. But if you live too long inside it, you forget who you are. It is hard to realize you're living a role when everyone praises you for being competent, kind, and likable. That is the trap of the persona. It earns applause, but at the cost of authenticity. A man who is always the strong pillar may secretly collapse each night. A woman seen as perfect may no longer know what she enjoys beyond making others happy. Are you living such a role? Pause for a moment and ask, who is living this life, the real me, or the version others need me to be? The process of shedding the persona is not gentle. It is a shedding of skin. And like any creature that has just broken free from a shell, you will feel exposed, vulnerable, and lost. Relationships built on your old version will begin to shake. Some people will say, "You've changed." And it's true, not because you've become worse, but because you've become real. And in that realness, you stop proving your worth through perfection. You begin to embrace the parts of yourself that are unlovable, the parts you once buried deep in the shadow, the parts you never dared post on social media. A participant in a Jungian-based therapy program once shared that she had lived for years as a woman who had to be strong. As the eldest daughter, the model employee, the person who never complained. She thought that was a strength until she was diagnosed with high-level anxiety disorder. In deep therapy sessions, when asked to speak the words she had never said aloud, she cried like an abandoned child. In that moment, she was no longer performing. She let her real self breathe, tremble, and be imperfect. That was the moment healing began. Jung believed that to enter the process of individuation, the return to the original self, we must withdraw identification with the persona. In The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious, he wrote, "The dissolution of the persona is therefore a necessary part of the individuation process. The dissolution of the mask is an essential part of becoming yourself. But it also makes you feel alone, not because there is no one around, but because for the first time, you are alone with your raw self." So here is something I want to ask you right now as you read this. Have you ever felt like you were acting in your own life? If so, that is not failure. That is an invitation to step off the stage and return backstage, where there are no spotlights, only the quiet, aching light of your inner world. Someone once asked, "If I live my truth, will anyone still love me?" The answer is, some will stay, not because you do everything right, but because you are truly yourself. Others will leave because they only loved your role. That loss hurts, but it frees you. Because, as Jung said, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. The greatest tragedy is the life never lived, repressed beneath inherited roles, generational expectations, and social standards. When you live truthfully, you don't just heal yourself. You begin to heal the generations before you, those who never dared to cry, never dared to say, "I'm tired," dared to take off their mask in front of the mirror. Today's world encourages us to define ourselves by our roles: what you are, what you do, how much you earn, what you look like. But that is just the outer shell. You are not your job title. You are not the compliments. You are not your Instagram image. You are what remains when all those labels fall away. And here's the miracle. When you begin to live truthfully, you discover that peace doesn't come from being loved by many. It comes from no longer having to perform for yourself. No more forced smiles. No more parties you don't want to attend. No more unconscious yeses. You choose silence when needed, honesty even when it's hard, and a relationship with less noise but more respect. You begin to live by the rhythm of your soul, not the rhythm of the crowd. The greatest privilege of a lifetime is to become yourself. And you know what? That journey is not glamorous. It doesn't look like a celebration. It looks like a cleansing, you standing alone, letting the water wash away masks that have clung too long, letting go of everything that is no longer you. And then you breathe. Lightly. Truly. If you are in that stage, the lonely place after leaving your role, the confusing space where you don't yet know who you are without the mask, be patient. This is what Jung called the transformation phase, where the old dissolves, but the new has yet to take shape. It is frightening, but it is sacred. Because from here, the self begins to speak, and you will see, little by little, you no longer need anyone to tell you who you are. Because you already know. You are becoming it, through every honest moment, every quiet refusal to keep playing a role you no longer believe in. Number 3. From anxiety to peace, you begin to feel inner stillness. And then, as the mask begins to fall away, as the old roles no longer hold you, you enter a space of silence. No more applause from the outside. No more praise for your endurance. No more empty encouragement for your sacrifices. No more pressure to be someone just to be loved. In that space, between the old and the new versions of yourself, a quiet fear rises. If I am no longer who they knew me to be, am I still anyone at all? At first, that feeling is emptiness, not the kind of sadness that passes, but a soul-level desert, a place where the old templates no longer fit, and the new has yet to take shape. It is in that desert that a silent transformation begins. Jung once wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "Who looks outside, dreams." Silence nearly drove her mad. But then, she started writing journal pages she never thought she'd have time for. She listened to old songs she once loved as a young girl. She went for walks without having to report to anyone. And slowly, in that seemingly terrifying solitude, she heard a voice buried for too long, the voice of a real life, one not tied to a role or a name. Are you in that phase now? When you stop trying to be loved by someone else, you begin learning to love yourself, quietly and steadily. And here's the strange thing. This stillness is not like the loneliness of your past. It is not hollow. It has weight, rhythm, the breath of a soul. It is a kind of peace you cannot buy with achievements, cannot find in applause, cannot borrow from someone's gaze. It only comes when you're brave enough to stay with yourself, without judgment, without fleeing. Jung never said you must detach from the world entirely to find peace. He believed the key is not to lose your center while living in the world. Clarity comes only when you dare to look into your own heart. And if you are beginning to hear that heart, even just a whisper, you are stepping into the most sacred space of the individuation journey. Ask yourself, when I no longer try to please anyone, how do I want to live? You may not have the answer yet, but simply stopping and asking that question is already a revolution. Real peace begins when you stop living by someone else's rhythm and begin creating your own. The anxiety won't vanish overnight. It will test you through doubt, through old voices rising when you choose rest over work, through guilt when you set boundaries. But then, the second time you choose stillness, the third, the fifth. One day, you'll realize you no longer feel empty. You feel full of life, of awareness, of truth. And you'll know, this is home. Not the place where others clap for you, but the place where your soul is free to breathe, where you are no longer required to be anyone but yourself. At that point, silence is no longer something you run from. You make peace with it. You let it guide you. And in that very stillness, you hear the most precious sound, the inner voice, the voice. Number 4. From bondage to liberation, toxic relationships dissolve on their own. And as peace begins to take root within you, like a long-awaited exhale after years of holding your breath, you'll notice something else, subtle yet inevitable. Some people begin to drift away, not because you did anything wrong, but because your new energy no longer aligns with old attachments. It might be a childhood friend, a long-term partner, or even a family member. They don't vanish overnight. They grow distant, uneasy with your transformation. And one day, you realize they become part of your memory. Their departure is quiet, but it leaves a deep echo in your soul. This is one of the hardest parts of choosing yourself. You can no longer maintain relationships that were built on one-sided sacrifice. You used to compromise, yield, and do everything to keep the peace. You tolerated being dismissed. You accepted being taken for granted. You clenched your teeth and endured it all for the sake of harmony. But now, as you learn to listen to your inner voice, you begin to see that what was once called love was an unconscious contract, where you had to play a role just to avoid being abandoned. Carl Jung called these entanglements unconscious contracts, invisible agreements signed in childhood without your awareness. The suffering doesn't come from the past itself, but from continuing to act out patterns that no longer serve who you are now. These contracts are usually signed with guilt, fear of abandonment, or the false belief that I must carry everything to be worthy of love. I remember a woman in her 40s who once described her marriage as stable enough not to break. Every day she quietly endured an emotionally absent husband. They lived like two shadows under the same roof. When asked why she didn't leave, she replied, "I don't want my kids to lose their father. And I keep thinking, if I just try harder, he'll change." But during a therapy session, where she was invited to write a letter to her 15-year-old self, she broke down in tears. In shaky handwriting, the teenage girl had only one wish: I want someone to notice I'm sad and ask me why. For the first time in her life, this woman understood that she had been playing the role of caretaker since she was a child, and now it was time to set that role down. When you choose yourself, you begin to ask, do I want to stay in this relationship, or am I just afraid of being alone? That question alone can cut the tangled cords of toxic attachment. At first, it may feel empty, but soon you'll realize you've lost nothing. You're just clearing space for something that simply complete their cycle. And the tree, which is you, now has space to grow new buds, to welcome connections that are more respectful, more aligned, more true. When you choose yourself, you send a signal to the world that says, I am worthy of unconditional love. And the world, in its strange way, begins to answer with things you never dared to hope for. And what about you? Have you ever had to leave a relationship just to save yourself? If you want, share your story below, even just a line. Someone reading it might feel a little less alone, because we are all learning how to return to ourselves. And you are not alone on this journey. Number 5. From repetition to creation, you become the true creator of your life. Have you ever woken up on a quiet morning, no rush, no alarm, no noise except the sound of your breath, and realized the steering wheel of your life is finally back in your hands? No more voices disguised as responsibility. No one out there telling you what you should do today, how you should live, who you should become. You sit there with a blank page before you, not a sheet of paper, but the page of your life, waiting for you to write each line in your inner voice. And even if the pen in your hand trembles, even if your first words feel clumsy, the fact that you are holding the pen, that you are the one creating, is already a revolution. That is the moment you stop repeating. You begin to create. Instead of living on repeat like a pre-programmed sequence, waking up, going to work, nodding on cue, completing tasks, smiling at the right time, returning home exhausted, then starting a new day like a faded copy of yourself, you pause and ask one crucial question. Am I truly living, or just existing so no one is disappointed? You once called this repetition stability, maturity, being responsible. But beneath those well-meaning words, a soul has been slowly silenced. Carl Jung once warned about this in The Undiscovered Self. A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. Sometimes the inferno Jung refers to isn't some terrifying place out there. It's the constant refusal to heed your true inner calling. It's when you know you need to change, but keep choosing the familiar out of fear. But if you've ever dared to walk through that veil, even once, you understand. Because the moment you dare to ask, what do I truly want? Something new begins to stir. It doesn't come from the world outside. It comes from you, the one who has long forgotten how to listen within. Questions that once seemed simple. What do I want to do? How do I want to love? Where do I want to live? What brings me joy? Now become the foundation for a new life. A life no longer built on social expectations, but born of honest connection with yourself. I once met a woman, accomplished, respected, a global marketing director. She had lavish vacations every year, a wardrobe full of designer clothes, and a bank account that never ran low. Yet every morning, she woke feeling like she was dying a little more. There was no obvious reason, just a persistent sense of meaninglessness woven